guys, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new to the channel, welcome to the channel. And as you can see behind me, in this video, we're pulling old Wasabi out of retirement. She came out of her coffin, and we're gonna get ready for some big racing coming up. We wanna make sure we come out swinging this year, so I've got a bunch of goodies for the car that we're gonna throw on it. We were very, very competitive this year in our no prep, but we did a lot of radial no prep. As you can see on the car, we had radials on it before. We are going back to our slicks. We're going back to, you know, the no prep, if you want to call it that. Radials were still no prep. But as far as that goes, we're going back to slick, back to small tire. But we've already made a bunch of changes. The car is much faster than it was last year at that race. Let's go ahead and jump into some upgrades here. So the very first upgrade that I've actually already started on, actually about a month ago inside the trailer out of my house, was we went to a new ECU. We stayed with Holley, but we decided to get away from the Terminator X and go to HP. The main reason being is originally we were gonna go to methanol. After doing a bunch of research on methanol, it was kind of the thing that we needed to do for many reasons, and we'll jump into that here in just a few. But in order to run methanol, we had to change the ECU over to HP because it has the NPK O2 sensor and stuff like that. The other big reason we wanted to change to it is when you let off the trans brake button, you can actually set it up to data log that whole pass as soon as you let off the brake. So that is a good thing there. Before, I always had my computer sitting in the chair here. I'd hit record, do my burnout, all that good stuff, and it was a lot to do while I'm getting staging and in the lanes and stuff like that. So that is going to take a little bit of weight off my shoulders and a little bit of the stress off as you're coming up to the line. So we've plugged in the Holley, or the HP. You can kind of see it hanging down there. So I need to get it mounted, and then I need to change over all my inputs and outputs. So on Holley, HP, and Terminator X, they are plug and play for about 90% of it. The inputs and outputs are not plug and play. So in the Terminator X, you can use pulse width negative and all ground negatives and things like that for all your outputs, where HP does a lot of power outputs. And I haven't learned a whole lot into it yet, but we're gonna have to mechanically change some of the wiring in the fuel pump relay and things like that. Not fuel pump, sorry. The fan switch relay, things like that. Our bump button, trans brake, and all that are gonna have to be changed over to 12 volt and 20 volt. There is a really good video on YouTube that Devin Vanderhoof has done about the whole setup into that. So I'm not going to jump into that because I'm following his video. So if you guys need any of that information, go to his channel. I think it's like wiring trans brake up in a Holley HP or something like that. But very good informational video there. So check out Devin Vanderhoof's video there. But so those are the big things we need to do to get that project done. It is not going to make the car any faster by changing over to ECU, but I think it's just a great upgrade that we've needed to do for a while. And we'll go ahead and just get that done. The biggest concern I have is the bump button, trans brake, and I had my scramble button on my bump button before. So I'm not sure how I need to wire that up. That's something I need to do more research on first. I don't want a third button in there. We don't need a third button. So if I can piggyback it off another button like Terminator X did, that would be just awesome. So I'm not going to show a bunch of video of just mounting that up and the wiring. I'll tell you right now, wiring is boring to see, but just kind of letting you guys know that is one of the big upgrades that we're doing, and changes there. So let's go ahead and jump into the engine bay, and I'll show you our first upgrade. All right, so before we jump into our first upgrades on the car here, let's talk a little bit about why I was wanting to go to methanol. So as you can see in the car, we have an air-to-air intercooler on here. It was a bigger intercooler. It was set up originally for the RB in the blue car, that is now in the blue car, but it was in this car. And it was only rated for about 700-800 horsepower. So that air intercooler right there was restricting us a ton. Not only was it restricting us a ton on boost and airflow, the intake air temps were through the roof. At the end of the run, I was way over my coolant temps, like 200, 220 was what we were getting at the end of our runs on air intake temps. So many of you know that is a dangerous temperature to be at the end of the run at full boost and stuff like that. So we needed to figure out something, how we're going to keep these engine temps down. And I tried to go through a bunch of different scenarios on changes that we could do to make it better. You know, like I said, ultimately the goal of methanol is that it's a very cool burning fuel, keeps the engine cool. You can actually not even run coolant in the engine. You can run, you know, turbo straight to the intake, and you get rid of a lot of a boost lag and things like that when you go to methanol. So that was kind of the big idea behind going methanol. The problem with methanol is that it clogs up a lot of your fuel system if you're not very diligent about changing over fuels as soon as you're done with the race. Within a day or two, you can have clogged injectors, clogged fuel lines, clogged fuel filters, and it is just a very harsh fuel to run. Plus, it's, I don't know, I've never personally bought it, but I've heard rumors about it being expensive. I don't know yet. So that was another, you know, thing that we have to think about. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole. I robbed the radiator out of this car for the blue car that we just built with the RB in it, and decided we were going to go with a little Honda radiator in here. Reason for being is because we're going to try to keep the temps down. We're not going to use this car as a drag and drive car anymore. So on that note, we don't need it to be drag and drive friendly. We don't need to be driving around. It's not a street car. It's a little over that realm anymore. So we can go to a small radiator on there, and that's kind of our biggest concern there for that. Anyway, so let's move on. I dove into it. The belt-driven fuel pumps for methanol or gear-driven, cable-driven for methanol, those things are like $2,500. That is a lot of money. I don't have the budget for that. The other big thing is I don't want to put a fuel cell up in the front here. If you run a belt cog-driven fuel pump, you have to have your fuel cell up here. You can't have a big long run of fuel line because it won't pull the fuel that it needs to get the engine started and all that. So I like my fuel cell in the back. I don't want to put it up front. So that was the first negative to methanol for me, is I don't want to change all that up. I can run a cable-driven fuel pump back there, but I've seen just recently our buddy Vince Murphy at Big Sky Race Week, his broke and took him out of Big Sky. That really sucked, and I don't want to deal with that either. So that was kind of another no-go for me. And so on and so forth. You know, do we need bigger injectors? Do we need, you know, there's just so many things that come on that list. So after doing a little bit of grocery shopping on that list, it was going to be $4,000 to $5,000 to $6,000 to get this thing switched over to methanol like we wanted. So I kind of scrapped that idea, and I said, you know, kind of go back to the drawing board, figure it out. So we came back and we decided that we were going to stick on E85, but we were going to go air to water. And the reason I originally didn't do air to water either is it's an expensive changeover. The TIC Performance has got a really nice air to water intercooler that sits in between the intake. But after doing all that, it's about $3,000. And my biggest concern is, you guys know me, I want my factory hood on there. I don't want the intake stacking up so high that it sticks out of the hood. Just not for me. I love the way this car looks with the hood on it. And I don't want no big, you know, cow induction hood. So that wasn't an option. The second thing with air to water is, as you can see, there is no room in this car anywhere for all the accessories. So I had to kind of think out of the box for a little bit, and a buddy of mine, Sean Fink, they did some changes with their fuel cell for Rocky Mountain Race Week, or not Rocky Mountain, Big Sky Race Week, where they chopped it in half and they used half of it for pump gas and the other half for E85. So then all they had to do is change over a petcock to run E85 on the track, and then they could turn it back over and run pump gas for the drive. So that got me thinking, why don't we do that with our air-to-water box? Because that's the reason I never did it. We couldn't fit an air-to-water box inside there. So on that note, we decided that we're going to change over the whole fuel tank, which wasn't too expensive. You can order a Rhodes fuel cell / ice tank box on Jigs for like $500. It is a 5-gallon fuel cell and a 5-gallon ice tank. That gives us right at 10 gallons of liquid capacity. Now this car is a no prep car. I have 17-gallon fuel cell in it, and when I race, I fill it up to the very brim because it actually gives me a better weight bias in the rear. I actually use it as a weight ballast in there. So I didn't want to get rid of the big old 17-gallon fuel cell if I didn't have to. So how do we change that? You know, so that was kind of our big goal there. So we're going to swap over to a fuel cell and the water tank in the back there. So on that note, we're going to get rid of the air-to-air intercooler. We've got ourselves a new air-to-water intercooler, so we're going to be running some new air-to-water lines, air-to-air or air-to-water. The new tank that I got also comes with an in-tank water pump, which is really nice because having it remote and somewhere my problem is real estate. I have no place to put the water pump in the car. So that is another big thing that I had to figure out, which is that, like I said, the water tank has the Rhodes water pump in it. Just serves its purpose and gets the job done. But before we get started with that upgrade, because I'm still waiting on some parts in the mail, I do have all the parts for our second upgrade, and I'm going to show you guys what we've got going on here. So like I said before, we are going to be going to a Honda Civic radiator, a little tiny radiator, single fan, and stuff like that. So we are going to be getting rid of the mechanical water pump and thermostat housing, all that good stuff. One big reason is we kept throwing the belt all season. I did a bunch of different pulley setups and things like that, as I'll show you in here, but we just couldn't keep this belt on. So this is an ITC alternator tensioner bracket. Well, actually that's just the idler. And then we did a tensioner bracket right over here. That did help quite a bit, but with the engine plate, it was very hard to get all the spacing just right. And on top of that, with my water pump, you can see to get the spacing right, I had to put a 1/4 inch spacer in between here, plus the 1/4 inch engine plate and things like that. There were just so many things that were battling us on that. And the reason I wanted to stay with that water pump, a GM water pump, is we were doing drag and drives with it. If we lose a water pump on race week, and it's a full week long, I can go to any parts store and order that water pump or have it in stock, put it in the car, and we'd be back on the road. But now that we've decided to make this car fully race car, full no prep, track, all that good stuff, we don't necessarily need all that. So we are upgrading actually to something even better. So we are going to delete that water pump. We are going to be putting in a Craig's Davis remote water pump. So as you can see, this big old log sitting right here, it's a Miser. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but a buddy of mine that actually has another Z in Utah. You guys may have seen him on Street Outlaws. He actually crashed his Z a couple years ago. It's a really beautiful orange car. He's in the middle of rebuilding that car at the very moment, but he's selling a bunch of parts. He had this LS water log for sale for $250. So I wasn't passing that up. So I ordered it up. He shipped it over to me. And that is going to be the start of our water system changeover. So we're going to bolt this bad boy on. We're going to move the alternator over to the driver's side now that we don't have a thermostat and all the water pump stuff sitting over there anymore. So I've ordered an ITC alternator bracket for that side. We'll be moving that over, putting the water log on, Craig's Davis water pump, and then we'll be going to doing all our water lines. I'm thinking somewhere right about in here. So our radiator is actually really small. So if I can tuck all the heat off onto the driver's side, right about here and over would be the radiator. So as the fan pulls, it's also cooling off the exhaust and everything else. But it kind of leaves the mouth of the turbo open for some fresh air. Before we had the radiator sitting all the way up about here. And so the turbo is just always pulling hot air. And that was another bad thing about the air-to-air and the turbo where it's at. is it's just constantly hot air. There's nothing we can do to control that with the setup that we have. So the new air-to-water intercooler that I have, I'm going to change it up a little bit. I've already kind of got it all designed. But I'm going to put it right here in the hole. And I'm actually going to kind of angle it this way so we don't have to change our boost pipe here. I'll be able to just come right off there, straight up in there. And the way the cold air, or the water box is going to be pointing that way. There's going to be ice cold water running through it. So that's going to kind of chill the air temps as it's coming this way. And it's hopefully going to kind of just direct that colder air straight towards the turbo there. So that's just kind of the thought process and idea of the design of what I'm going to do here. I'm not sure it's going to work, We're just going to jump in it and see what happens. But I do know for a fact that all these changes are going to get us more horsepower more longevity out of the engine, safer. We'll be able to turn up the timing a little bit more, having colder intake temps and things like that. The other great thing about the remote water pump is when we get to the pits and it's time to cool the engine down in between runs, we can put it on a switch as well, so we can turn it on and have the water flowing through as we have our fans, sitting here cooling the radiator down. We can turn the water pump on and it'll start pumping cold water through, so we can get the engine cooler with the remote water pump. We'll get the intake temps down. And then I think our last upgrade is we're going to be putting in E98 instead of E85, because it's just going to be a little bit colder burning fuel and just a little bit safer. All again, it's going to be E98 is better for 1,000 horsepower plus. It just burns a little bit better. And then after all that is said and done, if I have time, the very last thing I want to do is I want to change over the rear end a little bit. So right now I have a Panhard bar in there, and the rear end doesn't operate too well with it. When I first did all this stuff, I didn't know a lot about it. So I want to change it over to a Panhard bar. Or no, sorry, not a Panhard bar, a Wishbone. So that way everything in the geometry works together with the 4-link as it should, because with the Panhard bar and a parallel 4-link at the very moment, they kind of operate against each other a little bit, and it just doesn't function as well as it could. This car does very well as it sits, but I think we can always make it better, and I think we can have a winning combination with this car if we just keep moving in that right direction. So as of now, I think I'm going to quit talking. This is, like I said, this is the intro video to us upgrading the car and getting all these sweet upgrades done. So I hope you guys are excited to follow along with this little mini build before AZ Cash Days. And we'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell for more videos. Catch us coming up and hopefully winning that 20K in Arizona. We'll see y'all later.